animals: grizzly, wolf, bison, and caribou, and above their heads a giant eagle soared. On the front of the plinth, a plaque announced in English and French that the monument commemorated the sacrifices of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit men and women who had worn Canadian uniforms in wars and peacekeeping missions. The drumming and chanting were coming from the far side, but the small man's eyes had dropped from the heroic figures to the 2 rows of flowered wreaths standing on wire tripods that were ranged along the steps leading up to the monument. He had a vague sense that the presence of the wreaths meant that it must be not long since the Remembrance Day observances of November 11th. The date brought a flash of memory, a soundless image of men with weary faces and mud-spattered uniforms throwing helmets shaped like soup bowls into the air, some with mouths set in bitter smiles, some weeping openly. Then the picture was gone. One of the wreaths drew his gaze. It stood apart from the others, a small circle of dark red flowers woven through evergreen boughs. At its center, encased in plastic, was a framed photograph of a man with strongly aboriginal features, the cheeks flat-planed, the narrow eyes almost Asiatic. He wore a beret with a parachute badge. Beneath the picture, a wide ribbon bore the legend Sergeant Thomas George Prince, 1915 to 1977. The chant and drum grew louder, but the small man did not move. He stared at the black and white image, and the man in the photo looked back at him with the confident half-smile of the consummate warrior, a smile that said, "I know who I am, and I know what I can do." But it wasn't the smile that held the man motionless in the freezing rain, staring at the image while the ice built on his shoulders and covered his wool cap like a helmet. He stared at the picture of the Aboriginal sergeant in the old-fashioned British-style Canadian Army uniform, and more images came. Bright sunlight on dry earth, small trees with dark leaves and clumps of green fruit. "Olive trees," said his own voice in his head. A dusty road and soldiers marching in puttees and canvas webbing, bolt-action rifles slung from their shoulders. "I know you," he said, his voice a grating whisper. And as he spoke, the drums ceased. The chant ended on one last hey-ya. The small man stooped and reached for the photograph. It came free of the wreath. He pulled the ribbon loose and wrapped it tightly around the plastic-covered cardboard. Then he opened his coat and stuffed both prizes inside, against the worn checkered shirt that covered his hard-muscled torso. He buttoned the coat back up. Now he stood in the falling sleet that whispered as it struck the ground, no longer noticing the bite of the wind that made the ice-covered trees rattle like dead men's bones. He put his hand to his chest, pressed the cardboard against the beat of his heart, and said again, "I know you." When he stepped around the monument to find the drummer and chanter, no one was there. The Empty Quarter, Saudi Arabia, the present. Heat. Outside the camouflaged hangar, disguised to look like a low-rise in the barren landscape, the air rippled with desert heat under a sun so fierce it seemed to turn the sky white. The lean man with the close-cropped iron-gray hair stood within the open doors, the toes of his polished black boots just behind the line of light and darkness that separated the hidden building's shade from the searing blast of the sun. His ice-blue eyes followed the progress of the VTOL jet as it came in low and slow to hover in a cloud of grit a short distance beyond the open hangar. The plane, mottled with desert camouflage paint, settled onto its 3 wheels, its whining thrusters throttled down, then turned aft to roll the jet slowly into the hangar. Wolfgang Freiherr von Strucker turned on his heel with parade ground precision and accompanied the aircraft into the darkness. Behind him, swarthy men in loose, long-sleeved robes of white cotton, their heads bound in flowing white scarves secured by a double black cord, rushed to roll the outer doors closed. The jet's engines cycled down, and its double canopy levered up as the Arabs pushed a wheeled stick.